We have a couple corrections to give. Not ours. We have no need for corrections. But however, apparently Sean Hannity does. You'll recall, did you play the...
we played this yesterday.
Oh, did you play this clip, 14?
No, not the correction.
You pointed out there was just to catch people up, there was a clip of Sean Hannity interviewing Curtis Silva, who's a lunatic and former head of the Guardian Angels, or he's still head of the Guardian Angels.
Yes. A Republican mayoral candidate against Eric Adams as well.
And a former right-wing radio host.
They have matching jackets. They're like the T-Birds, but they just beat up people that speak Spanish.
Ladies,
yeah.
And,
that's more of
Sean Hannity was interviewing him, and in the middle of the interview, like all of the Guardian Angels behind Silva, just sort of ran off. And Silva was like, "We're taking down an immigrant right now." And they turn the camera around. They see like all of them jumping on this guy. And he's like, "This immigrant was acting out of, was acting up. And so we had to take him down."
They said he was shoplifting too, if I'm not mistaken. Suspected
shoplifter. And it turns out, as Emma mentioned yesterday, that in fact, actually, no, he was not shoplifting and not an immigrant. He just wasn't white. And here is Sean Hannity doing a correction.
Fox Nation. Now, before we go tonight, I want to talk about Curtis Sliwa's appearance on this show on Tuesday night when members of the Guardian Angels stopped a man and the police were called. Now, Curtis said that the man was...
Pause it for 1 second. Hold on. I just want to make it clear. They didn't stop a man. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like, "Excuse me, sir, would you wait here?" They jumped on a man. They physically accosted a man.
Yeah. I
hope they get sued.
Oh my God! Yeah, they accosted him. Like, I guess they stopped him technically. Like, if I curb stomped you, would I be preventing you from moving forward? Would I be detaining you technically?
Yeah, they forcibly stopped him from like continuing his trajectory on the sidewalks.
Yeah. That's one way to phrase it, Sean.
Show on Tuesday night when members of the Guardian Angels stopped a man and the police were called. Now, Curtis said that the man was a migrant and that he was shoplifting. Fox News has since spoken to the NYPD. Apparently, the statements made by Curtis that the man is a migrant is not true, and the man was given a summons for disorderly conduct. Now, today, Curtis Sliwa acknowledged to the Washington Post that the man has not been charged with shoplifting, and Curtis said, in part, quote, "I shouldn't have been listening to the crowd. That was my mistake. I should not have had that knee-jerk reaction." Again, on this show, we always want to... Fox Nation.
Okay, first off, I love the fact that you had just a cascading series of blaming somebody else.
Exactly. It wasn't his fault. It's you.
Scylla blames the crowd, et cetera, et cetera. And
old lady who swallowed a fly over here.
Like, and then the other great part about this is that also want to thank Semantic. And other voting Smartmatic, I should say, rather, because that's why you get that correction.
Yeah. So my favorite part is he stopped a man, ... and the police were called. This is like the kind of thing, I wrote that down, where you're editing your paper and you'd put like a little arrow ahead and just like add a comma and like there's another part in here before the police were called and in between when the man was stopped and when the police were called. What happened? Because we all saw it. You turned the camera excitedly to live stream this man getting basically beaten up by these guys in matching outfits. And in that same AP piece, Sliwa had a quote, and he said, in an interview with the Associated Press, Sliwa said that he believed the man was a migrant because he was, quote, speaking Spanish, and because other Guardian Angels...
That's,
suspicious. And you would never hear that in New York. And other Guardian Angels had encountered him with other Spanish speakers on previous patrols. And this is the quote. "He was put down so he wouldn't hurt himself or anyone else," Sliwa said.
Yeah, he didn't want to hurt himself on somebody else's like elbow slamming into his back. It's just unbelievable. They should all be arrested.
It's a hate crime.
They should all be arrested, and they should all be enjoined from going around and wearing the outfits and being sort of like trigger happy toughies. I'm sorry.
If you accost someone, if you beat someone up for speaking Spanish, that is a hate crime. That's definitionally a hate crime, right?
I mean, I would hope that the district attorney is looking into this case. There should be charges.
Alvin Bragg was criticized for not necessarily. I mean, they are looking into it now, but that there was a delay in it because. In the end, why is that guy getting disorderly conduct anyway, right? It's because the cops are way more sympathetic with a guy like Sliwa and their little fanboys in outfits doing their patrols for them. Because they're in their own like WhatsApp group sharing the migrant, crime hysteria. Like this is the kind of language cops speak. We saw this in the George Floyd protest when they go to those vigilantes and they're like, yeah, you're good, man. They're ideologically aligned with that.
100%. And the context for Silva being able to sit there and go like, we just spotted a migrant and my crew has just, apprehended him and taken him down. We could tell he was a migrant from the Spanish. The context for that is the supposed attack that we were told that migrants launched on New York City police officers. And the New York City Police Department released a clip of video that ostensibly showed these attacks by migrants. And we were told like there was a gang of migrants who were blocking Times Square, which is, if you've ever been to Times Square, the idea that you could identify people who were blocking Times Square. Everyone's blocking Times Square.
Yeah.
You've got groups of people who are huddled around, tourists, whatever.
Like all these loiterers in Times Square.
Exactly. It's just absurd.
They were outside a migrant shelter also. Yeah.
They're outside a migrant shelter. They're there hanging out. Maybe they're planning what they're going to do tonight, or maybe they're trying to figure out where they should go, or whatever it is. But to find groups of 6 people in Times Square, bunched up discussing something, is probably like the easiest thing in the world to do. And to see cops break up like this family's from Ohio, and they're trying to figure out which half-price ticket they're going to get for Broadway.
Yeah.
I mean, give me a break. Watch what happens. They released, and the amazing thing is that Bragg releases the entire video and then continues to charge these guys, and this is all a function of the cops. We got incidentally, we've got whoa, pause it. We've got multiple angles of this. We're going to show you first the body cam footage.
41 Street. West 41. No, West 41. Mijo. West 41. West 41, mijo. Let's go. West 41, mijo. Let's go. Move. West 41. No doors. Vamos. West 41.
So they're saying West.
No, I don't care. Vamos.
That looks like they're having a break.
Parece Betty la fea. ¿Pero qué pasó? Ey, ¿pero por qué me paraba mi fe? Claro, que me voy a el carajito para el niño. El niño baja.
Okay. Now let's look at the overhead one. This one you can clearly see. The guy that the cop ultimately grabs is walking away. Now he's pushing a little baby stroller where he has like some of his stuff in there. I don't know if he's talking when he says Nino. I can't make out everything he's saying, but it's I think he's talking about it's his little boy stroller or something.
As
that
possessions, at least, yeah.
But you can watch the cops here. Go. So they're sort of walking. They stop for a second as they're walking away. The guy like fixes his little carriage thing.
That's him in the yellow.
In the yellow. He's pushing it. He's walking away. And then the cop just grabs him. He's the last one. That's what's going on. They grab the last guy and they slam him up against the door. And the cop's saying, like, the guy's saying my kid stuff. He's trying to get away. And then he gets into the fight with the cop. The cop has already slammed him up there. And the guy doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean,
Like some cop just separates him from all his crap.
It is, I mean, the idea that they didn't go around to harass the immigrants in this instance, it's clear that's what they're doing.
And in some of the context from this report from the city, the men were walking away singing a rap song that had some like curse words or whatever, that he apparently says that the cop or someone around him looks like Ugly Betty in Spanish, which I don't know if the cop understood that, but at the same time, it's like, fundamentally, it's not a crime to sing in the street in Times Square. It's not a crime to speak Spanish.
Yeah.
So it's another same thing where it's like these cops are basically saying, if you are even like remotely recalcitrant, despite breaking no laws, we have every right to just pin you up against a wall and start haranguing you physically, and then you will be in trouble. You will get the extent of the law as a result of that.
and it seemed like he was complying before they pushed
He
him
was
up
complying.
against the wall.
He was literally, seemingly in the video, organizing his belongings before taking the stroller down.
He
to
was
41st
literally
Street, where they were
walking
telling him to go.
down away from the cop, and the
Yeah.
cop went in front of him. But again, he was the last guy.
Right.
You could see the cop look at the other group of guys
go,
saying, okay,
continue
they've
to go.
moved on. I can get this guy.
Yes,
Yeah.
the wounded elk theory.
Exactly.
Wounded antelope.
And then, so this is the instance that we're seeing being circulated all across right wing and mainstream
And by
media.
Al Sharpton on
And Al
MSNBC.
Sharpton on his show when he
Sharpton.
talks about the migrant invasion.
Talking to Chris Murphy and talking to Chuck Schumer about this exact situation as an example of the migrant invasion. And also, when Bill Hemmer and Dana Perino on Fox News discussed Curtis Sliwa's incident, Hemmer justified Sliwa and the Guardian Angels being there on that corner because of this instance.
It's
So
nuts.
this is a good lesson for people, folks. Like between the organized retail theft, between these claims about crime going up and up and up, even though the data now shows all crime is on the decline at this point, violent and things of that nature after 2020 and 2021 with the pandemic. Like, don't take retail associations or cops' claims about this stuff at face value as if they are a neutral party when they have a clear incentive to frame a situation in a way that is more beneficial to them. And especially if you're a journalist, you're supposed to be inherently skeptical of who in power is making these claims and why they're making them. And that is exactly what undergirds all this crime stuff. Literally, the desire to believe it is just so crystallized in, like, you want to believe it because you're kind of afraid and you don't really like certain people. And so then we all have to kind of accept this.
There is, when I see something like this, it seems to me perfectly reasonable to assume this is a deliberate strategy by the cops to create stories like this. There was absolutely zero reason to, of all places, in Times Square, to say that these 5 or 6, guys were somehow, I don't know, bothering
Trying to
people in
hurt
Times
cops.
Square. No, well, they clearly did the first engagement, and there clearly was no, there was absolutely no thing that they could ticket them or charge them with. They basically just said, go to West 41st Street. We don't want you here. And when they started to move and got no pushback from these immigrants, the cop grabbed one and created a situation. It seems to me that this was like clearly part of the agenda. We're going to do this. We're going to create some type of incident. And when you hear Eric Adams and his rhetoric about this, the idea that this message would get to the cops: do not hesitate to harass any migrants you see.
Well, because they're pissed too. Like the cops are mad that they have to deal with this situation. We don't have enough housing for people. That's a part of like the rot of this, like the fact that we don't have enough housing and affordable housing and shelters for people in the city. Then the cops handle everything. This is part of like what a reimagining policing looks like, is moving some of these things away from their purview. This is the problem that's much deeper than the migrants coming in. It's the way that we've decided to structure our city. I just saw a New York Times article about like average rent in different cities across the country. Number 1 for a 1-bedroom is New York. I mean, it's well over $4,000. Number 2 is Jersey City, right across the way. Number 3 is San Francisco. But like, all of this is because, specifically in this city, we've decided to have a complete real estate corporate takeover of housing. And it's just now, as I've said before, like New York Times, why they don't want the migrants there is because New York Times is supposed to be Disneyland for tourists. Like this
Times
is not
Square.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, what did I say?
New York Times.
Oh, Times Square is supposed to be a Disneyland for tourists, right? And like, let's make this clean and remove these migrants from here. But cities are not just supposed to be playgrounds and places for people to spend money and participate in, like, you know, capitalism or go on a freaking, you know, Dave and Buster's. It's also places for people to live. And that's the bigger
I think it's even
problem.
beyond that, because, you know, Times Square, I just don't think that like they're going to be that sensitive there. I think there's a political value to a former cop who is running for mayor to say, in the same way that this guy ginned up the idea that there was sort of rampant crime in New York City, to now gin up the idea that there is a rampant, violent migrant situation. And because it's the same reason why the Republicans want to create a false meme about a crisis on the border. We're the ones who are going to come in and do it. It triggers people. They get afraid. And who are you going to vote for? You're going to vote for the cop, because you're afraid of all the crazy, crazy crime that is supposedly happening. It's not really. Really amazing.
I'm reading Wayne Barrett's Trump book, The Greatest Show on Earth, and it just is like the point about rent prices isn't lost on me, because like even back then it was like the Trump Tower next to Central Park. All the units facing the park were always dark because people didn't actually live in them. They were just held for speculative value, and that's the Hudson Yards. That's every building you see affect the skyline of a great city is just filled with units that are speculated by capitalists.
The latest data from the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies, which was released in January, found that a record high 22.4 million renter households, half of the renters nationwide, were spending more than 30% of their income on rent in 2022. That is a record number of Americans who cannot afford their rent.
And that's what constitutes a burden, right? When it's 30% or over?
Yeah. The number of affordable units with rents under 600 also dropped to 7.2 million that year, 2.1 million fewer than a decade earlier. That's adjusted for inflation. So it's really about what constitutes affordable. There is been a dramatic rise in eviction filings, a record number of people becoming homeless. The senior research associate at the Harvard Center, Whitney Airgood Obricki, said it's one of the worst years we've ever seen, who added that the level of cost-burdened households in 2022 had not been seen since the Great Recession in 2008, when 10 million Americans lost their homes to foreclosure. And remember, that was a function of an acute financial meltdown. We have something now more structural and systemic that is causing this. The hardest hit have been renters who made less than $30,000 and who, after paying rent and utilities, were left with just $310 a month on average. I mean, what if you have kids? What if you, never mind, did you have kids? Like, what if you feel like you need to eat?
Yeah. I mean, this is why the sort of 24,000 foot. Oh, look at even wages I agree, wages have probably gone up for working people. That doesn't surprise me at all. I'd like to see it go longer than like half a business cycle. But people need that to survive because everything else has gone up.
Yep.